Hey there, in this video we're looking at introducing fractions, so recognizing the features of fractions and what they represent. So by the end of the video you should be able to identify your numerator and denominator and also equivalent fractions. So just to get us started, what is a fraction? Fraction is an expression of parts of a whole. So we do that by noting that the denominator, the number on the bottom of a fraction, is how many parts the whole is cut up into, and the top is your numerator, which is how many parts you are looking at, so the quantity of how many things you have. So you can always think of it as your pizza, and with that pizza, nice pizza here, and I cut it up into half and I eat this half of the pizza. I've eaten one out of the two pieces I've cut it into. And that is what fractions are. So to get us started, expressing one quantity as a fraction of a whole. So what we look at is when we see a type of question like this, or we think about in the application of like real world, like I do a test, or I'm in the middle of something, I'm a quarter of the way, 3/4 of the way, that's 3 parts out of 4 completed, or 1 part out of 4 completed. Pizza's always a good one. And in this question here, I can see I've got one whole rectangle and it is cut up into 8 pieces. So that's going to be over 8. So because I can see it's divided into 8 pieces. And I can see I've got 1, 2, 3 pieces shaded, so that's 3/8. Now I'd like you to pause and complete these ones in your exercise book. Alright, so the next one here is equivalent fractions. So equivalent fractions is when we have fractions, although they might look different, when we simplify them, so that means dividing them by a factor of both the numerator and denominator, they all create the same simple fraction. So in this case here we've got 2/3, they're coloured in here in the pink, so I'm going to write that as 2/3, and I'm also going to write this one here, which is 4/6, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there are 6/9. Now we can simplify all of those there, except for this one. This is already in its simplest form, and it's going to give us 2/3. If I look at 4/6, I can identify a common factor, which is 2. So what I do to the top, I have to do the bottom, or vice versa. So I'm going to divide this by 2 and this by 2, and that will give us 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So see how they match, or they are equivalent. And then the next one, in this case, 6 and 9 are both multiples of 3, which means that 3 is their factor. So what I do to the top, I must do to the bottom. So I'm going to divide them both by 3, and that equates to 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. So here we go, we can see that these fractions are equivalent, and we also have a visual display here. So here we have some some fractions. We're going to identify the equivalent fractions of 1/2. Now what I'm going to be doing is seeing if I can simplify, so that means finding a common factor between the numerator and denominator and dividing by that number, both values by that number, to give us our simplified fraction. So in this case here, 4/5. 5 is a prime number, 4 isn't, but 2 is not a factor of 5. So I can't change that, that's simplified, but that is not an equivalent fraction of 1/2. 3/6. I can see 3 and 6, their common factor is 3, so they both can be divided by 3. So that's going to give me 3/3, gives me 1 and 2, so that is equivalent. 3 and 9, they do have a common factor. Well, if this is 3, this is going to be 1/2. If this is 3, you're not going to get any other, like, that can't be an equivalent, but we're still going to treat it anyway if you were unsure. 3 is a common factor, and that gives us 1/3. That is not equivalent. 17/34. Guess what? That's equivalent because 17 is half of 34. So even in the language, I can see that gives me a clue. Half is 1/2. So that is going to be equivalent. And 4/12. I know half of 12 is 6, so it's not going to be that. But also, if I wanted to verify that mathematically, 4 and 12 have a common factor of 4. I can divide them both by 4, and that gives us 12 divided by 4 is 1/3. So that is not equivalent. However, let's answer the question first. Identify the equivalent fractions of 1/2 are going to be 3/6, 17/4, and and they're our halves. Now, the other thing is, you'll note that, just on a side note, this fraction here and this fraction here are equivalent because they both can be simplified to 1/3. Now, I would like you to have a turn, pause the video, and have a turn of doing some yourself. Okay, thanks guys.